Welcome everybody to this Biointegrates panel session that's focusing on drug delivery. Really excited, we've got an excellent panel of speakers here today with us, so I'm really looking forward to a really good and interesting conversation. I'd like to start by just going around and asking each of the panel members to introduce themselves one by one. At the end of that session, we'll be showing a short video from Nanoform, who are one of the sponsors of Biointegrates today, and then we'll get right on into the actual discussion itself. Without further ado, I'll introduce people, or just ask them to introduce themselves, just as I've got them on my my list here. So first of all, if I could ask Sally to introduce herself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sally Waterman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of MedHerent. It's a company that's developing a novel patch for delivering drugs through the skin. It has the potential to broaden the applicability of patch delivery to a wider range of molecules. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for over 30 years in senior R&D and operational roles, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Sally. Then if I could ask Faz to introduce himself.
Right, unmuted. Hi everyone, I'm Faz Chowdhury. I'm the founder and CEO of Nanoform Pharma. We're based in Loughborough and we develop drug delivery systems aimed at delivering drugs through the skin, ranging from passive delivery all the way through to injectables. So I look forward to the discussions.
Thanks very much, Faz. And then Paul.
Thanks, Darren. Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Stott. I'm CEO and Director at SADA Pharm Dev Services. So SADA is a consultancy company, a service company that offers pharmaceutical development and clinical pharmacology. In this, we think we have a certain unique selling point in that we focus on both the design and the product performance of the products we design. So pharmaceutical design and then in vivo performance of those products. We're not a drug delivery company as such, but we offer services to the biotech industry to develop those drug delivery assets, those drug delivery solutions to their molecule. And we do not have any proprietary drug delivery, but we'll often work with providers of those proprietary systems to help the biotech companies to move their assets forward. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. And then if I could ask Roz to introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Roz. I'm the CEO of Keratify. We are a biotech bioengineering company advancing preclinical testing for skin, and that's across the fields. It's not just transdermal therapeutics, it can also be cosmetics. But really what we have changed is that standard test methodology is far too permeable. And where you look at 3D skin models, they're 5 to 50-fold more permeable than human skin. Animal models lack accuracy and aren't very good at replicating human skin. So what we've achieved is really maintaining human skin tissue for a considerable period of time to very high accuracy, to really facilitate the development of many therapeutics, but particularly the transdermal drug delivery systems that really require that hugely accurate physical chemical properties.
Great, thank you very much, Roz. I'm sure we'll pick up on some of that as we get into the discussion.
Perfect.
And then the final member of our panel today, Christian, so if I can ask you to introduce yourself.
Darren. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christian Jones. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Nanoform. I'm a chemist by training, and I spent a lot of my time in the pharma space working in drug discovery, drug development and manufacturing, but also with a focus on particle engineering and drug delivery. And delighted to be here today. Nanoform are an innovative medicine-enabling company, and we use API nanoparticles that we create from our CESS technology that can go as small as 10 nanometers and up to 200 nanometers typically, to overcome some of the challenges in pharma clinical attrition by solving the solubility and bioavailability challenges. But we also use those particles to enable drug delivery routes. And we have a video that I'm delighted to showcase with you today, and that highlights an upcoming clinical trial that we are conducting and sponsoring in partnership with Quotient Sciences to prove the value of our technology in humans. Thanks very much.
Nanoform is a nanoparticle medicine-enabling company that works to facilitate life-changing medicines for patients around the globe. Our award-winning nanoparticle engineering technology, controlled expansion of supercritical solutions, or CESS, enables us to nanoform drug substance particles to improve bioavailability and solubility. By doing so, our technology addresses a leading cause of failure in the drug development pipeline, with a significant proportion of new drugs failing due to poor solubility. Through our unique nanoforming process, we aim to double the number of novel drugs reaching the market and touch the lives of 1 billion patients globally. We partnered with Quotient Sciences to create a nanoformed formulation of the anti-inflammatory drug piroxicam for use in human trials. By applying our technology, we may be able to significantly improve the pharmacokinetic properties of the drug and potentially reduce both the required dose and side effects. By showing the value of our technology to enhance this popular therapeutic, we are one step closer to nanoforming the medicines of tomorrow on a large scale. Our main goal is to give hope to patients suffering from currently incurable diseases and to help more people around the world access life-changing treatments.
The journey of a nanoform drug candidate begins as powder of the raw material, which we convert into uniformly sized nanoparticles using our CESS process. Initially, we dissolve the piroxicam bulk powder in supercritical carbon dioxide, an environmentally friendly solvent. By carefully controlling the temperature and pressure, we achieve stable nucleation. The nanoformed API particles undergo rigorous testing to ensure that they meet GMP requirements.
The successfully nanoformed piroxicam is carefully transported to our partners at Quotient Sciences, who will manufacture a tablet formulation of the drug at their state-of-the-art facilities in the UK. Nanoform's partnership with Quotient Sciences will culminate in the first ever human trial of a nanoformed drug candidate.
To overcome the long-standing challenge of poor efficiency in pharma, we as an industry need to pool our expertise to develop and implement innovative solutions for patients. We created our CESS technology for precisely this reason, and the partnership between Nanoform and Quotient Sciences represents a significant milestone in Nanoform's history. We look forward to continue working with industry partners to help life-changing drugs reach the patients who need them.
Okay, great. So I think let's now get started and get into a bit of a discussion. I'd like to start really, I guess, picking up on something that Paul actually indicated in his introduction, where he said he wasn't a drug delivery company. I think this could be considered a relatively simple question, but I think drug delivery means different things to different people. So what does drug delivery actually mean to you, and what is a drug delivery company? So I guess, Paul, would be a good idea to start with you.
Okay, thanks, Darren. And certainly isn't a simple question. I think there's a number of perspectives that you can look at from a drug delivery perspective. So you can think of drug delivery from a kind of patient convenience perspective. So you might employ some drug delivery techniques to improve a therapy for an existing molecule, to improve the patient experience, to improve some of the feedback that patient might or physician might receive, and that would improve therapy, absolutely. So there's that category about the whole patient experience. might be different dosing, route of administration or dosage regime. But I think the second is then to think about drug delivery from an enabling perspective, so enabling challenging molecules. And I think it's this second piece that's really coming into focus at the moment. And if I can, I think I've just read a paper from Marion Ashford at AstraZeneca, and others have talked in this way, but thinking about drug delivery in terms of almost the various generations of drug delivery. So what they call the first generation would be about maximizing exposure and perhaps controlling that exposure. So overcoming poor solubility, controlled release to modify that PK profile, again, to affect the best outcomes. But moving on now, and what's happening certainly in the last sort of 5 to 10 years is thinking about second generation, which would be targeted delivery. So how can we alter the biodistribution of a compound to target perhaps a tumor in an oncology setting? So, and some of that's where you see some of the nanoparticle or nanotechnologies coming through, things like antibody drug conjugates that might target a specific site of action in the body. The big advance, and I think the big excitement that's coming through, and you see this in all the vaccine delivery that's going on at the moment, is where you're looking at site-specific intracellular delivery. So how can we present these different moieties, these different modalities to the cell and modify how they're taken up and expressed in the cell? And you see that right now with the BioNTech vaccine. It's an RNA-based, nucleic acid-based product. And a lot of the technology in that is the delivery technology, the lipids that's encased in, which will present that to the cell in the right way and present and maximize expression of that RNA, which is what's driving efficacy. And I think what's really interesting there is, you know, BioNTech is a company that's gone from being an immuno-oncology company to being a vaccine company in a very short order, because they're able to bring these nucleic acids through very quickly. And a big part of the success of that is the drug delivery technology that's allowed that to happen. And then the fourth, and perhaps the next generation of drug delivery, is in the whole sort of tissue engineering, stem cell delivery, which again offers massive potential for the future. But certainly the piece in my mind that's right in vogue at the moment is delivery of these nucleic acids to the cell, to the right part of the cell, and modifying the expression of those nucleic acids. So it's a complex answer to what sounds like a relatively simple opening question.
Yeah, that's great. And as I kind of thought, Paul, with this, it's not necessarily a simple answer. I think in my sort of premise there that it means different things to different people. So maybe, Faz, I could bring you in there. And so from a Nemora's perspective, what is drug delivery, and is Nemora a drug delivery company?
Sure. Well, you know, it brings back memories about when I started off, when we started off Nemora. I remember speaking to a few friends about the fact that we were going to start off a drug delivery company. And they said, forget it. There's no way you're going to be able to compete with DHL or FedEx. No way. And so you realize that obviously it means different things to different people, without doubt. I think Paul described that quite well. And, you know, you can break it down to devices. You can break it down to formulation, and then the actual specific delivery of that molecule, because often the formulation doesn't necessarily imply that you're going to get site-specific delivery, for example. It could be quite simply a case of, well, I have a liquid vaccine and I want to deliver it as a solid dosage form, as a solid injectable, for example, to avoid maybe the cold chain storage, make it easier to administer, etc. So you know, there are several categories, you know, both the device side, the formulation side, and the molecule side, in terms of how you're potentially specifically delivering that molecule. So in a broad sense, it is those areas. In terms of our focus, I guess we cover all of those, because on the one hand, we have our own proprietary devices. On the other hand, you know, we have formulation technologies. And then, you know, we've also looked at things like niasomes and liposomes for targeted and site-specific delivery. So yeah, I would say when you consider that, we certainly hope we are a drug delivery company.
Well, that is really encouraging to hear, as we're in a drug delivery discussion panel, that I have a drug delivery company here. Thank you, Faz. Sally, maybe from your side, so you were talking about technology for transdermal drug delivery. So what's your perspective on drug delivery?
Yes, well, I would definitely say that Medherent was a drug delivery company. I think when people do think about drug delivery, often a patch is something that people are familiar with, particularly those who've tried to give up smoking with the nicotine patches. It's something that, is generally accepted as a drug delivery technology. And I think just following on from the things that Paul was listing, one of the other considerations of, you want to try to deliver the drug in the optimum way to a patient to give the best combination of safety and efficacy. And one of the things that delivering drugs transdermally can do is smooth out the pharmacokinetic curve to reduce the maximum plasma concentrations, for example, by delivering things over a whole day or even a whole week in some cases. And by doing that, you can reduce the incidence of severe side effects in some patients. So I think it is really thinking about what is the best delivery method to get the best out of that particular drug. And it doesn't matter whether that's a patch or some other kind of mode of delivery. It's what is the best for that particular molecule and that particular patient group and the indication that's being treated. Great,
thank you. There's obviously a lot of really interesting stuff going on at the moment within drug delivery. So why now? What's the reason it's an opportune time for drug delivery? And maybe I can bring Christian in on that one.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question, and I think there's many different reasons why drug delivery is important right now. I mean, it's been around for a while. It's not something that's new. We've been innovating in the drug delivery space for some time in the way that we deliver medicines for patients. But I think there's ultimately the patient need, which is number one, and opening up new routes for drug delivery can enable accessibility increase for patients. Finding different delivery methods that can allow certain drugs to be delivered to different patients is one thing. Then I think when you consider the drug discovery space and how we have evolved in the pharma industry, we've potentially taken a lot of the low-hanging fruit, some of the more simple molecules, and they've been developed and they've been taken to market. And some of those are excellent blockbuster drugs, and they've really helped change patients' lives. But we're now looking at discovering more complex drugs, and they can be more challenging. So, to start with, as the small molecule size increases, they can become harder to dissolve, harder to absorb in the body. And then, you start to think about different unique and innovative ways to try and help them. And that's coming back to what Paul was talking about, perhaps first generation drug delivery, about maximizing exposure. There's also very high dosage products on the market that potentially, could be reduced in terms of by either reducing their particle size or using different drug delivery methods. And so that can be advantageous for supporting the patient, potentially taking away some of the side effects that might be associated with high dose products. And then if you look at the larger molecules that are being developed, the ones that perhaps sit between small molecules and biologics, some of these dendrimers, some of these large peptides, oligos, they can be really challenging to be absorbed in the right place where you want to get them in the body. So, we have to think about innovative ways as we're developing new molecules again to deliver those to patients to get the maximum therapeutic effect. And biologics in their very nature can be challenging to deliver. So, oral delivery methods can be challenging for biologics because you don't want them to be denatured in the stomach. You don't want them to be. You want them to go to the right place of absorption. And injectables tends to be the preferred means of delivery there. So I would say those are some reasons. I think technology obviously is now better than it's ever been, and as we progress, it will always likely to improve. But we also live in a world with an aging population, and that causes challenges for delivering medications from the perspective of I think in elderly patients, 30% of elderly patients suffer from xerostomia and have difficulty in swallowing. So some of these larger tablets can be quite challenging for elderly patients. So finding new ways to either reduce the size of the pill or to deliver the products in different ways can be very valuable.
Great, thank you very much, Christian. I think covered quite a comprehensive area there with that to give it a good indication as to why now is a good time. Maybe I can come to you, Ros, on this. Obviously, you've started a company up, so obviously you see there are some great opportunities in this area. What are they to you?
So I think, first of all, if you look at the fundamental principles of drug delivery, we have, bar topicals, we need to get drugs into the body in some means. And I think that if you look at the oral drug delivery market, that has traditionally dominated the market. And fundamentally, this is because once you've got past the stomach, you then meet an organ that is designed to actually absorb molecules. It's trying to get nutrients into the body. If you look at all the other routes for delivery, with the exception of just straight injection, you're up against a barrier, whether that's a lung barrier or a skin barrier. And I think in terms of creating opportune moments for drug delivery, we're at the forefront of not only bioengineering and biotechnology in terms of some of our tissue engineering capabilities, but we're also at the forefront of some of our material sciences, so that we can really create new forms of delivery. So whether that be microneedles, whether that be different chemistries of patches, whether that be different ways of inhaling compounds. But we're also at this vast understanding of omics, so we have this mass data capture as well, and we have phenomenal chemical understanding like we've never had before, and some of the very exciting cell engineering in terms of actually using that for as a drug itself. Is hugely exciting. So I think it's a massively opportune moment to start creating new approaches to drug delivery and new technologies.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any thoughts on why now is a good time for drug delivery?
Darren, it's Paul. Maybe if I could just jump in on that and build on the comments so far. I think, as I kind of mentioned at the start there, but I think it's worth going into a little bit more deeply. I think the question around timing comes to the efforts and the progress that's been made in discovery, actually. So I think the discovery portfolio across big pharma and across the biotech world has really changed in recent years. Many more complex molecules coming through. So these molecules that fit between the kind of large and small. The nucleic acids, modified RNAs, etc., antisense oligos. These essentially are a drug delivery challenge in terms of getting those to the site of action. And I think that change in the discovery landscape has really it comes down to some of the challenges in discovery around the reasons for attrition. So if you go back 10, 15 years, the reasons for attrition in discovery, they're often the toxin efficacy based, but the drivers for those are PK and bioavailability, or they were. Where we're really getting to now is reasons for attrition around lack of therapeutic index. So the margins are so tight with these molecules in terms of safety and efficacy. And it's whether we can modify that biodistribution can suddenly turn on a whole new space, if you like, in terms of the druggable space for our discovery colleagues. So I think that's the real opportunity now. It opens up that whole discovery space if we can get the drug delivery challenges to be overcome. So I think that's that timing piece. And what I see in my experience in both large and small pharma is where drug delivery was a fix for a problem molecule, and it was done in a sequential order. You develop this molecule, you then find some problems, you then try and apply some on drug delivery, is becoming much more of an integral part of the discovery effort. So, groups are now seeing that it's about discovery and delivery of these molecules, and that's actually what's going to bring us some new opportunities from a therapeutic perspective. So that drug delivery part is going very, very early. In my own experiences in AstraZeneca, the drug delivery group was kind of subsumed into the discovery group, and that's exactly why. That's so you can align drug delivery and drug discovery together and get an understanding of both aspects, and really thinking about it from a therapeutic perspective, not purely the molecule.
Great, thank you. Just at this stage, I'll put a reminder out to everybody who's watching. If they do have any questions specifically for the panel, or for anybody particular on the panel, please send those questions in, and I'll endeavour during the conversation to feed those through. Maybe we again touched on some of this, but what are actually the benefits of moving away from traditional oral dosage forms? And Sally, maybe I'll start with you on that one.
Yes, thank you, Darren. I think, obviously traditional oral dosage forms have been typically the first thing that's been developed when a new molecule is discovered, because the development pathway and the regulatory pathway are very well known, and it's perceived to be easier. As we know, that often isn't the case, but it is perceived to be the easier of the route, but it doesn't always provide the best product. And as we've covered in some of the other conversations already, you maybe don't have the safest product, you may not have the most effective product, and you certainly may not have the most convenient product. So if you deliver a drug through the skin, through a transdermal patch, there are many things that you can do to improve all or each of those facets. So you can decrease the frequency of dosing. And as Christian was saying, that's particularly important at the moment with a population that's aging, where people have difficulty swallowing. And also, with dementia, people are forgetful. So, if you can reduce the need for someone to take 2 or 3 tablets a day with a single patch, that's obviously much more convenient. You can have much more confidence that the patient has taken their dose. And I think the other thing about transdermal patches is that you can self-administer it. So for something like buprenorphine for pain, for example, rather than have an intramuscular injection or subcutaneous injection, you can apply a patch for 7 days. You can administer it at home. And, for dementia drugs such as rotigotine, which isn't actually able to be given orally because it's got a low bioavailability anyway, a patient can be seen to have been received their dose because you can see the patch on their body. So that's another part of the compliance jigsaw, really. It's not just about being able to ensure that someone has less frequent dosing and is more likely to take their dose, but you can actually see that someone is delivering their drug because you can see the patch physically on their body. And it means that carers can administer a patch, for example, by applying it to the back of an elderly patient, and go away and know that the drug is being delivered during the day. And it can have more accurate dosing. For example, if you were delivering diclofenac with a gel, we all know that we squeeze the tube in a different way. You get a different amount each time you do it. You may not get high enough dose. But with a patch delivery of something like a non-steroidal for pain, you can actually deliver an exact amount that is shown to be effective in clinical studies. The other advantage, of course, of delivering non-steroidals through the skin is that they are associated with quite severe, in some cases, gastrointestinal issues, ulcers, for example. You can have an ibuprofen patch, which avoids having to take an oral therapy. So if you do have a propensity for GI intolerance, this is an alternative method. So I think, there's reduced frequency, reduced adverse events, both systemic and local. There's also the convenience of giving a patch, the self-administration, being able to see that someone's taken their dose, and, just generally perhaps reducing the burden of pills that someone has to take. I mean, many people are on multi-therapies, and if you've got to take 20 tablets a day, if you can eliminate 6 of those with a patch, I think it's going to help patients have a better compliance with their therapy.
Great, thank you. So does that mean that oral dosage forms have had their day, or are there still opportunities? I can see, Christian, you've come straight in there and taken your microphone off, so obviously definitely got something to say on that one.
Sure. I think we should be we should remember that oral is easy in respect of taking tablets. It can be relatively cost effective to develop oral dosage forms as well, but there's still a lot of value in the oral space. You know, there's huge opportunity elsewhere as well. As Sally was saying, in patches and, you know, a respiratory drug delivery, you know, making particles that can travel to certain areas of the lungs that can have more targeted effect, and with ophthalmics and all sorts of areas. But oral, I mean, there's a recent book by Pedro Martin and Helder Santos. It was published last week, and this explores how nanotechnology can be used for oral dosage forms. But there are challenges with oral. Don't get me wrong. There's significant challenges about, you know, where the drugs are systemically absorbed, you know, how they are absorbed and how permeable those drugs are within the body. But if you look at some of the technologies that are currently used for oral, things like spray drying, you have to use sometimes a 70% polymer loading to stabilize your product before you put it into an oral dosage form, which means that can be really challenging, and the pill becomes really, really significant in size. So technologies that can reduce particle size can make some of these oral products much more feasible, potentially make combination products within oral tablets feasible. And if you think about a cancer patient, you know, that has to go into hospital and have an infusion, or has to, you know, go through injections, I'm sure if you gave them the choice to take oral tablets at home, they'd take that, you know, hand over fist. So I think there certainly are still opportunities in the oral space, and you know, oral can be a great route of delivery. The question is, can we be more innovative in the oral space to develop better products? I think there's opportunity in drug delivery right across the dosage forms.
So it is very much a case of finding the right delivery formulation and a molecule for the right activity. So opportunities across all, which perhaps links into one question that's just come in, is where did the panelists see pulmonary delivery as an emerging option? And the question's framed particularly in light of current observations around COVID-19 trials with, for example, interferon, where parenteral delivery sees pretty much no efficacy, whereas pulmonary shows quite interesting clinical outcomes. So is pulmonary an interesting option in an area that's developing?
Darren, I can make a comment if you like. Again, and as is often the case with these things, there's two aspects to this. So there's pulmonary delivery for local treatment, and then there's pulmonary delivery as a route for systemic treatment. And I think you know, there's great strides. It's a really complex area, and the technology to deliver these things via the lung for local administration is a challenge in and of itself. I think there are many attempts to use pulmonary as a route for systemic administration, and that's been a real challenge, and I don't think there's been huge success there. But I think as the modalities change and the approach to therapy, maybe there is opportunity for more use of pulmonary delivery for systemic treatment. Certainly from a local treatment part, the kind of particle engineering, the device engineering and device controls is a hugely complex area, and I think it's been a real challenge to use the pulmonary route for systemic delivery.
So I have, maybe if I can add to that. So I have my own personal views regarding pulmonary delivery, and I think when it comes to local effect, like for example bronchodilation, etc., perfectly fine. We saw mankind trying to develop insulin, inhaled insulin, a whole host of issues. But for me, the biggest challenge with inhaled drug delivery is to do with the localized impact that it may have, because ultimately you only have one set of lungs. We heard earlier about, well, you can have these various medications like diclofenac orally or ibuprofen orally, and it leads to gastric issues, irritation, and so on and so forth, even ulceration. Well, you can live with that for a while, but if you started having similar kind of impact on the lungs, you can imagine the ramifications of that. So I think, when we talk about inhaled delivery, we've got to be very careful in terms of, well, are we talking about chronic administration or is it a one-off? And even if it's a one-off, the toxicity, the side effect profile, it's got to be really studied in great detail. And again, going back to oral delivery, one of the things that I guess we've missed is that, bear in mind that one of the great benefits of going transdermal is that you avoid the first pass metabolism. And first pass metabolism is responsible for a lot of the side effects that we see with orally administered drugs, not to mention the substantially reduced potency, let's call it, of the drug because of the reduced bioavailability just by virtue of taking it orally. So, but yes, sorry, on the issue of pulmonary inhaled delivery, I would say that my personal views are that with regards to chronic administration, I think you have significant hurdles and challenges to overcome. But if it's a localized effect, then we've already seen what it can do for things like asthma, etc. And for things like vaccinations, yes, I agree that there has been a lot in the literature recently in terms of how you can enhance the immune response. But again, I think you've got to look at how it's delivered, the formulation in which it's delivered, and are there any other lingering effects that you're going to see subsequently.
Darren, can I just add to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Christian.
So, so I think, it comes back to the point. It's finding the right delivery method for the treatment for the patient that's most suitable. And I think there's a huge opportunity in respiratory drug delivery. There's obviously the asthma and COPD disease areas, but cystic fibrosis, where you've got build up of mucus in the lungs. We've seen opportunities where nanoparticles can potentially penetrate the mucus in a more effective manner to be more effective in those areas. Also in oncology, actually being able to treat the lungs directly with the drugs rather than taking them in different forms. And where if you can make the particles small enough, they can actually be potentially trapped by the cells in the lungs and not clear properly, which means that they have a more localized delivery where you want them to be delivered at the site of action. And then pulmonary arterial hypertension and using the lungs as a delivery route for cardiac treatment. So I think there are lots of opportunities to use the lungs. Obviously, as Faz mentioned, we need to be conscious of side effects or tox profile of and what happens afterwards, right after you've administered that drug. And that's probably why respiratory drug delivery is a more expensive route for pharmaceutical companies to develop. But I think that there's been some huge success stories there as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Christian. I guess, as you say, it's really trying to ensure you're choosing the right technology and the right route for the therapeutic you're looking to develop. We've got just over 10 minutes left. There's a couple more areas I wanted to try and cover, and we've got a few questions coming in. So if we move on a little bit. We've already highlighted here that there's lots of great technology out there, lots of great opportunities, but why has consideration of drug delivery technologies and the adoption of those technologies traditionally been so low? So maybe Faz, you could start on that one.
Sure. So I guess there's one word that could describe it, and that's cost. Because if you have a drug that already works, then and you try to reformulate that or put it in a new delivery vehicle or delivery system, you are going to incur substantial cost, not just from the point of view of getting it ready for regulatory submissions and approval, but also potentially from a manufacture cost. So let me give an example. A lot of the pen injectors that exist today, they're quite cumbersome, bulky, et cetera, not really all that user-friendly. But if you look around you, pen injectors haven't really changed over the last couple of decades. And what you find, at least from the experience that we've had, is that, well, for us to change our production lines, it's going to cost X tens and hundreds of millions of pounds, and therefore, and add to that the regulatory burden that comes with it. Therefore, we don't see any commercial value. And that's the thing, that's what we find, that it's about commercial value, whereas I think it needs to be flipped. And you really must start looking at it, or industry really needs to start looking at it from the point of view of the patient. You know, what is likely to be more beneficial to the patient? Because ultimately, if you think about non-compliance of medications and what it leads to, if we can even enhance compliance or the quality of life by making something easier for a person to administer, then it certainly goes a long way. And yes, it will require investment by industry. And it's a question of at what point, you know, do we basically make that change? But from at least what we've experienced, cost has been one of the biggest factors in terms of making that change. And of course, one other aspect I would mention is that when we start talking about novel formulations, or let's say cell-specific or site-specific, tissue-specific delivery, you very often introduce novel materials. And with that comes a whole host of additional issues, because now, well, you've got to have a DMF for that material potentially, and you've got a whole host of, if you like, technical aspects that you've got to address by virtue of the tests, etc., that you have to perform on that material. And again, that poses another barrier to the potential entry of an existing or a new drug in a novel formulation.
Can I add to that? Would that be okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Ross.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. I also think some of the modelling has actually led to the loss of some potential very valuable therapeutics. So, for example, if you look at rodent models for skin absorption, skin irritation, they actually exclude up to 40% of compounds because they are far too sensitive. And when you start to look at 3D skin models, they can be as much as 30 to 20% inaccurate, actually predicting the human response. So I think when we're talking about how can we create new systems and really optimize our technology, we do need really optimized platforms that are human equivalent. And some of the animal models that were, developed in the 1940s are simply no longer fit for purpose, especially when we're talking about hugely accurate forms of delivery.
Could I also just pick up on something that Faz said about novel ingredients, because that is definitely a regulatory barrier. There is no harmonization of what is required for novel ingredient at the moment, and in order to include one in your formulation, you really have to wait until you file for your marketing approval to find out whether it's satisfactory or not. And this has been recognized by FDA, and back in at the end of 2019 they went out to consultation on a new pilot scheme. They went out to the industry and particularly to excipient manufacturers to try to think about how we could have a route to approval of new excipients, so they could be added separately from being included in a product to a database FDA holds on approved ingredients. This would be very helpful, because I think a lot of companies do not want to be the first to have a novel ingredient in their product, and therefore they may not choose that particular route if that's what's needed. And it also is a barrier to developing these novel excipients for those that have got the capability to do so. The process to get it to market is very uncertain. So I think this is another barrier that will, the time is right to overcome it, and hopefully in the next few years we'll see more novel ingredients coming through that can be applied to some of the whole raft of different delivery technologies we've been covering today.
Great, thank you. And you've actually picked up on the sort of final area I just wanted to touch upon. And as I kind of realised with this discussion topic, it's very wide and it's very difficult for us to cover all of it. But the last area I was just interested in was really around that regulatory aspect. And so I think the regulatory environment is evolving or trying to evolve to support novel systems. But what more needs to be done? Ros, maybe start with you.
Yeah, so actually, I was thinking about this, and I'm going to be honest, I'm a little nervous about Brexit, but I think there is an opportunity with Brexit, certainly for the UK in terms of regulatory guidelines and really making them very fit for purpose. So I'm not saying that regulatory guidelines are terrible, they're not, they're in place, they're there for a good reason, and we do need to protect society, and that's fundamentally the most important thing. But I would also say that some of the way we have approached our regulation could be changed. So, for example, our early stage testing is quite disjointed, and it's, you know, you have to look at each individual experimental scenario in its own right, whereas actually they're all very joined up. So what more can be done to make this a very joined up process that's really accurate, because then that will ricochet across all other phases of drug development. If you get your early stage platforms correct and fit for purpose, then you'll end up with far more confidence in the next stages. And also, I think at the moment we have regulations where a one size fits all. So we have our baseline testing where everything, you know, you have one kind of experiment that you want to be able to replicate, but then we wonder why when we hit phase 3 clinical trials, where we hit, you know, where we're realizing that people are individuals, a very expensive drug development pathway then fails and falls apart. So, like, what can we do? And I think there's huge scope with some of the big data that we're creating, some machine learning, being able to integrate this with some of our very early stage testing processes so that we can actually make it a far more integrated and cohesive early stage analysis pathway, so that we end up with like 90–95% confidence that a drug is actually going to pass at phase 3, rather than at each of the phase potentially 90% failure rate. So I think there's huge scope for improving the regulatory environment, for utilising some of the more organ-on-chip processes, some of the new bioengineering processes, but also by trying to find ways that we can actually ensure that we're replicating human responses. So at the moment, there's when we're talking about replacing animal testing, the animal testing, you know, the test that you put in place doesn't necessarily have to be better than the animal model that existed. And really what I think we should be demanding is human equivalence where possible.
Great, thank you very much. We're actually coming towards the end of our session now. We have had a few questions come in. I will try and cover some of these, but I would suggest that if I don't get to them, please join the networking session afterwards, where you can pick up questions individually with our panel. So the first one I would just like to try and put to the panel is that so the French famous for taking their drugs differently. I think I can guess what that's implying. But how does cultural differences influence drug delivery trends? Does anybody want to try and answer that question? Sally, I saw you.
I'll just make one brief comment about transdermal delivery using patches, which is much more common in Asia and in China and Japan in particular. And there are many, many more drugs available to be delivered by that route. So there are cultural differences, which obviously you have to be cognizant of as you're deciding which delivery to use. But also, you know, it's an opportunity in terms of where's the best place to commercialize your product.
Great, thank you. We do need to start wrapping up now. So there are a few more questions coming in, but if I could just ask people to join the networking session and pick those up with people individually. As I said earlier, I did guess this was going to be a very large topic and very difficult to cover everything in it. Hopefully, we've done a reasonable job of covering different areas of drug delivery, and at least got people thinking about it and thinking about the opportunities for that. So with that, I would just like to say thank you to all of our panel. Thank you for your time. I hope everybody's enjoyed it, and please join the networking session afterwards and pick up any questions with anybody there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.